So maybe you're living in the US right now, you just moved there, or maybe you want to move to the US and you're concerned about your English. You want to improve your English. You want to be able to speak English well because you think that it's going to help you fit in better. And we're going to give you some tips. We're going to talk about what are some things you can do to quickly improve your English while you're living there now, or you're wanting to move there. So you're new to the US. What can you do? Hello, Leon. How are you?
Good, Ben. How's it going, man?
Good, good. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone, what's up?
Hope you're all doing well. So, so if you've just moved to the US, well, you're in luck because you're in a country that speaks English. It's the primary language. And so you're going to have lots of opportunities to improve your English. And um, so we want to talk about what are some things that you can do to really accelerate your English learning because you want to hurry. You want to like get a move on it, right? You want to be able to speak English quickly. You don't want to be speaking bad English 2 years down the road, right? You want to quickly improve. So here's some tips. What are some things you can do to really quickly improve? I think that you're in the right place because day to day you have to speak English. In America, most people speak English. If you're not able to speak English, it's quite hard, I will say. Um, some places in the US you can speak Spanish, but if you don't know Spanish, then I feel like you're really screwed in that you're gonna basically you need to use Google Translate for everything. So let's give you some tips. I think that you should do a lot of listening. I think if you listen a lot, if you listen to native speaking and just sort of paying attention, try to figure out what they're saying, it'll really help you improve. The more you listen, the better of a speaker you're going to become. Not only will you pick up words, but even more importantly, and this is something that I think that a lot of learners underestimate. Okay, this is very powerful. And that is when you listen to native speak, it's not so much that you're just learning words. You can learn words in a number of ways, but what's unique to listening to native speak is how we use these words, how we position them in the sentence, right? The structure. And when you listen to natives, you're going to learn a native way of placing these words in a sentence, and that makes all the difference in sounding native. Obviously, this is not about accent. You can have a native accent, but not say things correctly. But if you don't speak English with a native accent, you can still be native like because you're putting words in the right place, and that comes from listening. Do you think that a lot of now you have some students, Leon? Do you think that a lot of your students could benefit from more listening?
Absolutely. Any English learners out there can benefit from it. I mean, the things that you described to placing it in, proper locations. But the most important by listening is the pronunciation, because if you don't have the right pronunciation, you're not going to be understood. So listening is a key part of trying to get a good pronunciation. So surround yourself. You talked about, like, if you were to move to United States, immerse yourself. Don't isolate yourself with your own group or your own ethnicity, right? People that you're going to talk in your own mother tongue language, or your culture. Immerse yourself, talk to people with different type of, ethnicity and race and immigrants. Doesn't have to be a native. It does benefit you by being with natives because you learn the culture, but and listening to them, sounding, the pronunciation, it's a great plus by doing that. I mean, there are so many ways, TVs, podcasts, parts of listening, right? YouTube, Netflix, all kinds of things, radios, music, all these. It's really beneficial of listening to how Americans are, and listening to their words and pronunciation and their sentence structure.
And also, certain words might be more appropriately used, or just might sound more colloquial, more native-like, more natural, more informal if the circumstance calls for it. I mean, like for example, you might be getting your coffee and you might be getting a coffee drink at Starbucks or something, and they accidentally put, let's say, whipped cream in your iced coffee drink, and you're like, how are you going to tell them you don't want it, right? You can simply say, I mean, a typical American will might just be like, oh, can you just nix the whipped cream? And you're like, what did that person say, nix? So you just learned a new word this way, and this is the perfect context in which to use the word nixed, right? Which is to remove, take out. Or you could say take out the whipped cream, but it's, it's another way of saying it that is very native like and contextually appropriate. um, but you're not going to say when you go buy a car, there's there's an option on the car you don't want, so let's nix that option. Well, that's not, we don't really say it in that way, right? So that's where listening really is good for you, because it's very hard to be taught how to use words contextually appropriately. It's very hard to be taught how and when to use a word that matches the moment. But when you listen, you just sort of figure it out for yourself, and it becomes instinctual, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you learned a lot of vocabulary words, like casual words, maybe slang, informal words that you never maybe heard of, that will further help you understand what people are talking about, especially with the native speakers. Also some of the phrasal verbs and maybe idioms, how to use it properly and not just throw it out there like you normally memorize. So these are the key factors, and that's why it's really important for you to uh, immerse yourself with native speakers. Because I'm not saying do it. I mean, you can also immerse yourself with other English speakers because you feel more safe, because they are also English learners, and they understand you because they're going through the same thing that you're going through, like learning a second language. But just don't have that fear, because not every American is going to judge you and criticize you. I mean, there are a lot of nice Americans that's going to help you and benefit from you. I'm not going to say all of them, but you will encounter quite a bit of them that will benefit and help you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely do as much listening as possible. Pay attention to the way people speak, the words they use, even the way they react to things, and the words they use to react to things, or perhaps the body language that they use to react to things. If you pay attention to that too, that will help you become more native like as a whole. You can be native like in the way you speak, or you can be native like in your just overall. In a holistic way, right? Not just your person, your essence is more native like, as opposed to just the words that come out of your mouth, because there's more to fitting in, and there's more to communicating in English than just the very words that you use. It also is bolstered by your body language, and just the unspoken words, right? So pay
Mhm.
attention to the whole thing. It's like watching a movie. There's a lot going on. You need to pay attention. And I think that if you're really into learning American culture, learning American English in a holistic way, you have to pay attention to everything.
Mhm. And I say, like, make it your own. You're learning the English language, make it your own. That's why you have identity. Build your own identity, not to be a standard what everybody sound like and when they talk. I mean, just build your own identity. If you think, because that's what makes us all unique, right? Authentic. Be authentic about it. Just go out there and do your thing and do you, right? So go out, start talking. Build your identity. Build your own way. You have your own culture, your own background, do it that way. But for me, the most important is get that pronunciation. That's the most key word, the clarity of it in order for you to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you become better at pronouncing words and more accurate by listening, not just by speaking. You have to do a lot of listening, because if you don't perfect your listening, you're going to make a lot of mistakes when you speak, and what will happen is that you're just going to reinforce your mistakes. So that's why it's very important to pay attention to listen actively.
Yeah, and you
Um,
can have a conversation and you get misunderstood, right? Somebody's going to give you a different answer, but that wasn't your question. And
yeah,
sometimes it could be inappropriate, and sometimes it's going to make that native speaker feel uncomfortable because you said a word that's to him or her, it could be inappropriate, but to you, you meant a different word. So you got to be careful in that pronunciation.
exactly. And here's where somebody might think, oh, I'm going to take a class, or I'm going to hire a tutor. And so let's talk about this idea of taking classes and getting help. Because I think that the first thing most people think to do is, oh, I'm going to take a class, and that is how my English is going to improve. And so it really kind of depends what level you're starting from. If your English is like almost zero and you're literally learning words like I am, like to be, or, the very basic verbs like go and things like that, then okay, you might want to do that. But at the same time, maybe try before taking a class, try using an app, because I honestly believe that apps are better at that level than using a teacher, because you can do it on your own time. You can repeat. It's not, you have a certain amount of time in a class in an hour. If you don't get it, are you gonna really hold up the whole class asking, what? But you can do that with an app, right? Nobody's gonna judge you for taking a bit longer to understand something. So do consider just personal learning on your own for a bit. And then I would say also hire a native tutor, so that you can ask questions, so that you can get clarification on things, especially if you're intermediate or advanced. I think that's where a native tutor would be helpful, but not necessarily worth your money to hire somebody to teach you just basic grammar. I think it's actually not a great idea, and it could be a waste of time and money. What do you think, Leon?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, for me, if you really want my opinion, I'd say definitely hire yourself a tutor or a coach or an English teacher if you have the money or if you want to invest, because you need to invest in yourself. I'm not being biased and say because I'm an English teacher and say, yeah, take an English teacher. It doesn't have to be through me. It could be with anybody, that you feel that you connect with and you find the right teacher, coach, or tutor. But for me, is the reason why you go through a teacher and uh, a tutor and a coach is because they're going to really guide you the right way. They're going to tell you how you can study and practice to help expand and expedite your English uh, language, improving. So they will give you a lot of tips in order to do that. Then it's going to save you a lot of money. It's going to give you like a sentence structure, your pronunciation is going to correct you immediately. You got question, that person's also going to teach you like the culture about how to live in the United States or dealing with Americans in the corporate industry and how to deal with people and what not to say. And there's a lot of things that you're going to learn. Now, you can do this on your own. Sure, people who don't have the money because they're in a financial struggle or just poor and don't have the money. Yeah, you can use apps like Duolingo, but I'm not trying to promote that. I mean, there are so many free apps out there, but that's mostly used just for your practice and study. It's not really taking you to another step and to another level. For me, it's like if you really want to expedite and take you to another level, you have to invest in yourself and get a teacher, coach, or tutor. That's how strongly I believe in, because they have their own materials. You'll learn a lot of things that maybe it's not on the internet. So, and they'll also tell you like, okay, if you're going to talk about phrasal verbs or idioms, maybe that's not the right way to use it. And it's not about memorization. So there's so many aspects of it. And that's why I strongly believe you go and hire yourself a tutor, a coach, or English teacher. Now, some people have the money, but they don't want to because, they're cheapskate. They're penny pinchers. They don't think it's necessary for them to learn because they can get it free online, internet. That's your choice. But for me, if you want to go through that route, it'll probably take you longer. I mean, than hiring a English teacher. It depends on your goal. If you're just going to go there for travel, okay, maybe you don't want to hire because you're just going to go on your own time when you have money. But if you're going to do it for wanting the better job, a better opportunity, corporate environment, then you have to invest in yourself. I don't see why you wouldn't. You want the higher salary, you want a nice position, you want to be successful. In order to do that, you got to invest in yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Do take a more active approach to your English learning, not to rely on other people, instructors. They're there to help you. They're not there to be your exclusive source of learning. That is where people go wrong, is when they put 100% of their learning, the effort on their instructor or even an app, right? It has to really
Mhm.
come from, the individual. Like, you have to go hunt it down. You have to chase after it. You have to sort of, it does require, unfortunately, some figuring out for yourself. So if you're like the kind of person who's kind of an independent person where you're good at learning things on your own, you're the kind of person who's going to pick up languages so much easier than anybody else. But
Absolutely.
when you do hire an instructor, I think that it's really important to know what to use your teacher for. Some people, they waste time and money asking their teacher, oh, so what does this word mean, or how do I pronounce this word? And yes, it's helpful to have a native teach you how to pronounce a word, but you could also use an app. Where it's more useful, I think, is when you ask a native how to pronounce it in the context of a sentence, because most people, honestly, it doesn't take much to get the pronunciation right. If you're looking at the word and you're pronouncing it, somebody just told you, you repeat it a couple times, you're going to get it right. It's not hard. What's hard is now read it in a sentence. I guarantee you're going to get it wrong. And that is where you should use a native. You should have your teacher show you how to pronounce it properly in the context of that sentence, so that you're inflecting properly, so that the way your tone is, it's either going rising or dropping, going up or down to match the moment, to match the essence or the feeling of what you're trying to say. Also, the other thing is, with an instructor, they can help you speak in a way that is more native like. So, for example, I got an email from this person who is not a native speaker, obviously, because you read it and you're like, huh? So whenever natives read non-native people writing English, a lot of times, yeah, we know what you're saying, but it is a bit like big question marks everywhere, like, huh, what, who, huh? Like,
Yeah.
we have to do a little decoding, right? So, like, for example, I wrote this person, I'm applying for a university program, and I wrote this person, and I said, I haven't gotten word of what's going on with my application yet. So I was wondering if you can tell, sort of give me an update. So this person writes back, um, send me your application ID. In case you have done so, please wait. So I'm like, what does that mean? In case you've done so, please wait. So I'm like, what? Okay, if
Hmm.
you look at it, if you look at the sentence, it makes sense grammatically, right? In case you have done so, please wait. But in this context, it makes zero sense. It's horrible English. It's horrible.
Hmm.
Grammar is all right, right? You can agree, right, Leon? The grammar's
Hmm.
fine. In
Yes.
case you've done
Right.
so, please wait. But
Hmm.
but really, it's horrific English. So I wrote back, I'm like, what do you mean? I don't understand. Then she just
Hmm.
writes, just give me your ID. So I think what she was trying to say is, give me your application ID number. But if you've already done so, then you don't need to. Just wait. In other words, somebody will get back to you, right? But that's not
Hmm.
how you write that. So
Yeah.
this is where, like, you need to work with an instructor to help you figure these things out, because you thought, oh, I wrote a perfectly fine sentence. Yes, you did, but it still made no sense. And then at the end, she signed her email, thank you for your understanding and patience. So that is obviously something that she cut and paste from something, because she saw in an email somewhere before, which also makes no sense in the context of this email, because it's like, this is the first time I've messaged her about this. We haven't been
Hmm.
going back and forth. There's no reason to say thank you
Hmm.
for your patience and understanding, because you only say that
Hmm.
when you've been going back and forth a few times and it's getting like, oh my God, come on. Then you would say, thanks for your patience and understanding. But since this is the first time we're talking about it, there's no need to say that. And see, this is the kind of stuff where you can get help from a teacher, and they'll tell you that, where this is, no, you don't need that. It doesn't make sense. There's no need to put that in there. And so I think that's the level of refinement that you need to work on when you get to a certain level. And that can only occur if you hire a teacher to help you with that, right? That takes your English to the next level, not even to a high level, to be honest. It just takes you to a level that makes sense, right? Not where beyond the
Absolutely.
words, you can make your words and your can make sense. They're laid out properly grammatically, like sort of like a math equation. 1 + 1 = 2, yes. But then at the same time, think of it like this: 1 + 1 = 2. You know what that is. That makes sense. But imagine I write out this whole strange, like, calculus equation with square roots and everything. The on the right side of the equal sign, that's the correct answer, but you don't know what that means. And this is what happens with language. A lot of times people write things that quote make sense, but nobody understands what they're talking about, right?
Hmm. And some of the people use this Google Translate and then they think it's okay, but sometimes you can't rely on Google Translate
No, yeah,
because it
exactly.
doesn't mean it isn't correct. So yeah, you can use different type of applications out there to help you maybe with your grammars and things like that, thinking it's correct, but in reality, it's not. And that's why
Yes.
it's important, like what Ben mentioned, is to hire yourself an English teacher, tutor, or coach. Yeah, that
Yeah.
specializes in the language. Yeah.
Right. Because it's important once again to focus on uh, context that makes sense. Like the big picture has to make sense. What happens with a lot of English learners, and you don't want to do this if you're living in the US, is you're just overly focused on the words and their placement, where everything sort of agrees. However, nobody understands you still. So that happens. And that's where having a teacher really will help resolve those problems and will really help you accelerate your improvement.
Hmm.
You know, when you're living in the US, it's very easy and there are a lot of opportunities to get feedback from native speakers. But I think that a lot of times people might have a hard time eliciting feedback from natives. Have you ever, not you, Leon, but to people who are listening, have you ever asked a native, hey, was that correct? Is there a better way of saying that? I'm just wondering, have you guys done that? Leave a comment. I'm wondering if you've asked people to correct you because that's kind of a touchy thing. Do you think that it places a heavy burden on you, Leon, if a non-native if an English learner asks you, not your student, but just either a friend or some whatever, if they ask you, oh, is this correct? Should I say it like that? Do you think that's a heavy burden? Do you want to correct people, or do you think that how do you feel about correcting people?
I mean, it really depends. If they come for my opinion, because let's say they needed to write something in an email or something to their boss, and they want to make sure it comes out good and professional and that kind of thing, then yeah, I think it's okay. But for us to really give our opinion, I mean, it puts, like you said, it puts a lot of burden on us as a native, telling another native to do something. It can go either way. But a lot of natives doesn't mean they're academically skilled, or some of them are illiterate. So yeah, sometimes you just have to help some natives. Depends on what their academic and educational background is. So for me, I don't mind helping as long as they ask. If they make a mistake or something, I'm not going to go and correct them. There are a lot of native speakers that if you do a wrong pronunciation, they will correct you. Like say, for example, if you're in the West Coast like we are, and somebody in the East Coast pronounces it differently, or the South pronounces differently, some people vice versa will correct you. There's a debate about like caramel, right? Or caramel, right? Which one's correct?
Oh,
Caramel or caramel, right? So depends on what part
yeah.
of the state you're from, right? So yeah,
Yes.
but I'm not going to correct someone unless it's really, really bad. But usually the ones I correct is are immigrants, non-natives. But natives, it's hard. It's a slippery slope because, like I said, they could be a different part of the state. They may pronounce it differently. I mean, you can correct them, but I know, like for example, aunt and aunt.
Mhm.
One native tried to correct me and say, "Oh, it's not aunt, it's aunt." And I said, "No, it's not. It's aunt. Depends
It's
on what part of
both.
the state you're from,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
This is
yeah.
my aunt." And no, she was like trying to correct me, like she thought I was non-native, right? And she was like,
Really?
"It's aunt." Yeah, she's like, "She's aunt," and I was like, "No, it's aunt." And then we started asking like what part of the city you're from and blah blah blah. And I find out she's from a different state, and I'm like,
Is
"Oh
she from
wait,
the
no,
East
I'm from
Coast?
California." Yeah, somewhere in the
Yeah,
East
yes,
Coast. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
That's really funny because that you brought up aunt and aunt because I've been
Hmm.
corrected by
You
an East
see?
Coaster as well
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
they often say aunt, and so they really to their ears they really don't like hearing aunt because they're like
Hmm.
aunt, you mean that thing that
Yeah,
crawls around your food? You know what I mean?
exactly.
So they
Uh-huh.
don't like that. I
Hmm.
think yeah. So like I think aunt is okay. I I probably normally would say aunt, but I've come to say aunt because I think that there's no I don't know there's no question what you're saying, whereas aunt might I don't know contextually no native would confuse it. However,
Hmm.
yeah, I get it. But the funny thing is that like when a native corrects another native, and that's why we don't like to do this. People
Hmm.
don't like you. People don't like
Yes.
you when you create them. You think you think they're a jerk for pointing it out, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like people think you're like a know-it-all. Like, who the hell are you correcting me? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that's why
exactly. I couldn't agree with you.
people don't like amongst natives. We tend to not want to correct other people because it makes you, if you're the one doing the correcting, it makes you look bad. Believe it or not. So we
Hmm.
tend not to do it. And no, now as an English learner, if it was between me and an English learner, I'm probably not going to correct them only because it's like nobody asked me.
Mm,
I'm not getting paid for it. I mean,
right.
I just want to communicate. Why do I want to correct you? I'm not your English teacher, right? So for the most
Exactly.
part, yes, for the most part, you guys, people, natives are not going to correct you because one, it makes them look bad.
Hmm.
Number two, they're not your teacher, so they're not going to correct you. Number three, you didn't ask for it, so they're not going to give you something you didn't ask for when they run the risk of looking like a jerk for correcting you. So
Hmm.
that's not going to happen. And also because it's kind of a lot of work, right? Because most likely, if they were to correct what you were saying, um, they're gonna like it's gonna be like nonstop correcting, and then it's like, okay, let's just get on with it. I just wanted to know what you did this weekend. You know.
Yes,
So
exactly. Yeah, and I correct people like my students. If you're not my student, I'm not gonna correct you because I'm not
yeah,
getting paid for that. Even before I
exactly.
became an English teacher, why am I gonna correct you? I think I said in one podcast that I had a new coworker. We started pretty much the same time. He's from Egypt, and I started talking to him in the bathroom, and I was just talking, and he kept asking me, "What was that? What was this?" I think it was a phrasal verb or an idiom or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
And every time I would talk, he would ask me a question, and I'm like,
That's
"Wait a minute,
annoying.
yeah, it's like what you said, you just want to know what happened in the weekend. I don't need to come here and try to explain. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm
Yeah,
not an
grammar
English
lesson.
teacher. Why?
Yeah.
And I try to avoid them. I don't want to deal with you because every time you're going to
Yes,
ask me
exactly.
something, I don't want that. I mean, there are times where I had an immigrant that asked, when I met him, I was like, hey, what's up? And he was from Japan and he goes up and he started looking up and I kind of like chuckled here and there because I didn't mean like what's up, like oh look at that. What is that? Look up, what's up? You
Yeah.
know, what is up? I said, what's up? And he started looking like there was something in the ceiling or something. I said, no, 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 no. What's up means like hello or how are you? And
Yes.
I guess the school didn't teach him this or his English teacher didn't teach him this. He was
Yes.
completely lost. He was like a fish
Yes.
out of water.
Yes.
So yeah.
It's funny you brought up that example of what's up because I noticed that a lot of English learners do not know what that means. And so, I mean,
Hmm.
now that, both of us were living outside the US. So, living outside the US now, I have stopped saying what's up to people because very likely they're not going to know what that means. But this is
Hmm.
what I'll do. If I want to know how good their English is, I'll say what's up. And if they get it, then I'll know. If they don't get it, then I'm like, okay, I get what level you're at, because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
a good litmus test, because if
Hmm.
those kind of colloquial expressions, if they don't get it, no matter how much you study English, you're not going to learn these things. That is why I'm talking about you need to do a lot of listening, because if you're wondering, uh, how can I speak more correctly? How can I speak more naturally? It's very hard to ask a native to correct you. You're going to have to correct yourself. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to assemble all the pieces by listening, which people don't do. They don't do because it's, I don't know, maybe they're lazy, they're not, it's boring, but you have to do it. Sorry, that's you just have to do it. It's like your research, right? You have to
Hmm.
listen actively, you have to listen to how people speak, the words they use, how they use these words, where they place it, and you correct yourself. You're like listening, and then you're like, "Oh, that's how you say it. I said it the other way. I put, this word here versus there, but oh, that's where you put it. That's how you correct. That's how you get corrected, is by doing it yourself. And that comes from listening. If you expect a native to correct you, you're not going to have a lot of friends because they don't
Yeah.
like doing it. It's kind of annoying.
Hmm. Yeah, it's part of your growth. It's part of your journey. You got to take
Yeah.
the time. I mean, in order to become better and improve yourself, you got to listen because that's how it's going to help you. There's no other way. There's no shortcut behind that.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
I know a lot of people that when they go to meetings and they don't even understand what's going on in the meetings. And sometimes they say, I only understand maybe 60%, 70%. I mean, that's kind of a dangerous, slippery slope because if they're saying something critical, something important, and you only understood 60% or even maybe 70%, there are a chance of that 30% something you can not understand and it can jeopardize your promotional, your job, your career. your advancement. So it's very important that you have to increase your listening in order for you to really take that next step, especially if you're in a corporate industry, in the international industry. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And speaking as much as possible will help you as well. And when you speak, don't worry about making mistakes. However, pay attention to, like, if you say something and then the native you're speaking to says it a different way, you might pay attention to the way they said it, because that's probably most likely, unless they're not that their English isn't good, but most likely the way they said it is right. And this is what I've noticed about either people being lazy or they're not really paying attention. So, for example, they'll say they'll say something. Let's say somebody says to me, an English learner, I say, what do you do for work? And they'll say, I'm a nurse. Um, oh, you're a nurse. Okay, that's cool. What hospital do you work at? And then they'll say, oh, I'm a nurse at, and then they'll say it the wrong way again, which tells me you just didn't pay attention to what I just said. So this
Hmm.
is what you got to do. If you say something in a certain way and the native repeats it in a different way, that's your like hint. That's your clue to, like, for example, I'm not going to correct somebody, right? If you say it the wrong way, I won't correct you, but I might help you out politely by just repeating what you said the correct way. And if you if you're paying attention, ideally you should immediately be correcting yourself on the spot, so that when you say that word again, you're going to get it right because you were listening to the way I said it. But some people, they don't do that, and then they'll continue to say it wrong over and over and over again. And that's not good. That's not good. So part of speaking also involves listening. You've got to listen while you're speaking as well. I think a lot of people, they just do one thing, right? They're just speaking and not really listening, or they're just listening and they're not speaking what they just heard. They're not speaking in the way that they heard it pronounced or what have you, right?
Yeah. I think it's because they're passively listening. They're not really focused on the listening part. And this is
Yes,
where
yes.
they
They're
get
not
lost.
actively listening. Yeah.
Yeah, they get lost in the conversation, and that's why when they speak, they don't put it in good grammar and sentence structure, and sometimes it's like a TED talk. They're going around in circles instead of just get to the direct point, cut to the chase, say what you want to say. I think in order for you to speak and improve your speaking, you got to speak. It's easy as that. How are you going to do that? I mean, do join groups, online groups, exchange meetups, language exchange. You can even practice speaking with your colleagues, like your friends or native speakers. You can do many things. Read a book. Here's a tip: read a book out loud. You can read a book
Yeah,
in
that's
your mind,
good.
but when you're reading out in your mind, everything is correct. Your pronunciation, everything comes out. But when you actually start speaking it, then you know that, oh, what, my pronunciation isn't right. I'm not speaking correctly. And take another step further, record yourself, listen to your recording, critique yourself. I mean, this is how, in order for you to improve in your speaking, getting that right pronunciation. There's so many ways that you can learn and improve your speaking, casual conversations, small talk, anywhere, everything. As long as you continue to speak, this is the most important thing. For me, like Ben, I think you learn a lot more with a native than you do maybe with an immigrant. I mean, that's me personally. Because why? Uh, we speak fast. It pushes you to listen and understand quicker than if you were to talk to an immigrant. Of course, talking to an immigrant is safe. You get to listen to accent. It improves your listening. But for me, I don't want to promote the nativism, but you know, but for you to speak to a native, like I said, it's going to enhance your listening. It's going to help you speak better. You're going to be able to use many vocabulary words, phrasal verb, idioms, things that maybe immigrants may not know, as well as casual, informal. We use a lot of casual words that part of our, English language that we have maybe an advantage over an immigrant or a non-native. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just my personal opinion. I mean, there are a lot of non-natives there that understands, live abroad, and can pick up, but we have the advantage because we're born and raised there. So, for example, if we're in our 30 years, that means we learned the language and all through those years. If a person is there who just lived there 5 years, 10 years, we have that advantage because we've been there 20 years or even 30 years longer because we were born there. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm not saying that we are better in any way. No, there are a lot of non-native speakers that are better speakers than native speakers, but that's just my personal opinion. If you put if you put an educated native speaker to an educated non-native speaker, who will be more better? In my opinion, a native. I'm not being biased or anything like that. That's just, it's just the advantage. That's me personally. But I'm not promoting nativism, I'm not promoting that. But that's just how my opinion is. Yeah. I don't know. What's your view on that? What do you think about that?
I think that it depends on the level of education of the native. If you're your typical middle class native speaker, you're
Hmm.
probably it's fine. But if you if you're somebody who really has zero education or didn't even
Yes.
finish, then it really just depends. It really just depends. Um, yeah. So because no, I mean, you can't assume that every native speaker is good in English. Just because they have the
Yes.
native accent doesn't mean their English is good. But if you're only focused on pronunciation or accent, then I think pretty much most native speakers are going to be fine. Where some of your poorly educated native speakers, they'll still get the accent right. They'll still get, they're not going to put the verb and the noun or the adjective in the wrong place. It's just that they're going to be very limited. It's kind of like when you make a it's kind of like when you make a pie. The pie is there. It's there. It's still going to be okay. It's just that the more educated ones are going to speak in a way that's kind of like the pie is going to be bigger. There's going to be whipped cream on top. There's going to be sprinkles. You know what I mean? There's just going to be a
Hmm.
lot more, right? Versus, it's like painting with two colors on your easel on your palette versus 10. That's really the main difference. So, um,
But for
what?
me, the way I'm looking at it is like because in the ESL community, especially in a social media, a lot of non-natives say that a lot of natives can't even communicate, and non-natives are better than a lot of natives. But then it depends. What you just mentioned depends on the education. You can't compare that to because you're comparing apples to oranges. If you're comparing an educated non-native to an uneducated native, there's no
Oh, I see.
comparison,
Yeah.
right? Of course, it's going to be better for a non-native, right? But if you want to be, correctly about comparison, then let's compare. Compare an educated, college degree, masters, or whatever you want to compare to, like apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You get an educated native versus a non-native educated person, teacher. They're both teachers. Who would have the advantage? I mean, for me, I'm thinking that the native has the advantage. I don't know. What do you think? Am I correct? Or of course, it depends on the school,
Depends on the
but let's just
person.
say, yeah, it depends on the person. But let's say they have the same educational background.
Oh,
They
of
have the
course.
same
If all things being
educational, right?
equal. Yeah, if all things being
Yeah.
equal, yes.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
That's what
But
I'm saying. Yeah.
but of course, of course, there are. It also depends on the personality type. Just no
Yeah.
matter, right? Because no matter how good somebody is when it comes to language, they could just be like completely boring and like have nothing of value to say because they're like a dead fish when you try to talk to them. It's like they're not hitting the ball back. It's like, hello, wake up.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if they're a native. If they're just like dead, they're dead. You know, or
Yeah.
same thing with a non-native. Sometimes I'm or somebody who's like a language learner. You have some language learners that are like, hello, are you anybody home? Or you have people who make a lot of mistakes when they're learning English, but they still hit the ball back in the best way they can. And those are the type of people who are going to improve. The ones that are like asleep, or they seem like they're asleep, they don't hit because they're still trying to figure out if they can say it grammatically correct. Unfortunately, those are the people who they're not going to improve so quickly because they're kind of like the person who like they take a test and they're like stuck on problem one. They never even get to problem two because they're not going to problem two because 12 minutes later they're still on problem one. You have to be the kind of person who's like, okay, problem one too hard, let me go to number two. Number two's too hard, let me go to number three. I'm going to solve three, four, six, then I'll go back to number two later. You have to be that kind of person when you learn a language.
Yeah, and it's a great thing that you brought up. Like personality really depends on the personality, the characteristic, how they teach. I mean, the connection, all of that plays into place, right? But if we're
Yeah.
just talking about the language, but but that's where it's very important. Depends on what their background is. Like if you want to learn English, like business English, you're going to get somebody who understands the business English, who has the experience, because a lot of times they don't have that corporate experience, and that's why you really need to look at the English teacher. What is their background? What can you gain
Yeah.
from them in order for you to be successful? It's not just the language itself. You got to look at the whole thing, right? And I
Right,
think
right.
that's where it gets lost when English teachers are trying to compare native versus non-native. I mean, it's beyond that. You have to really go dive deep into, you know, everything, not just, native and non-native. It's beyond that. So that's what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
get at. Because the way they're comparing is native and non-native. Okay, if you want to do that, then let's go to what I just said earlier. But it's beyond that. You actually have to go and deep, go deep inside of their background and see what's really best for you. Yeah, as a learner.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Selecting, so another tip, I guess, expanding on what you said, is just being smart about who you're choosing as your instructor, because there's a lot more to it than just this very overly simplified way of choosing somebody. Oh, you're a native? Okay, let's go. No, it's not like that. You have to go deeper, like you just said, Leon. The
Hmm.
person that you're choosing, is this somebody who really aligns with who you are? If you're, if you have a certain type of job that requires you to speak in a certain way, you need to have a certain level of polish and gravitas and a certain level of refinement in the way you speak. You need to hire somebody who speaks like that. You're not going to just hire any English teacher, right? Because then you would be learning how to speak English that is more maybe appropriate on the playground than in a boardroom. So there's that difference. And so, that whole thing of not all native speakers are the same. Obviously, right? So you need to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you need to work with an instructor who whose capabilities are aligned with your goals.
Hmm.
What about
Yeah.
daily, participating in social activities? Don't you think that's a good tip as well for people to think something to engage in to help them really accelerate their learning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're engaged in something that you like to do and you're passionate about, you're gonna learn your English language and improve in your English much quicker and faster, right? Because
Yeah.
it's something that you enjoy, something that you're active with and you're passionate about. So yeah, definitely. Whether that's a sports, whether that's a workshop or some kind of event, a community event, yeah, by all means, definitely. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you should not look to engage in activities related to English learning. I'm just going to say that. You should engage in activities that you're interested in. So for example, if you like hiking, if you like nature, join social groups that do hikes together. You're going to have meaningful, interesting conversations on these hikes during these activities, which will help you naturally acquire the language. And plus, you're going to be enjoying yourself. You're going to meet people who are like-minded. You're going to feel comfortable with people that you have something in common with, and therefore you're going to be able to reproduce the language without this whole self-editing thing going on, right? Because if you feel
Mhm.
comfortable with people, you feel like they're aligned with you, you feel like you vibe with these people, you're more likely to be less shy about speaking the language, even if you make mistakes. So yeah, do definitely find things that you like, some hobbies or whatever, and try to join groups that engage in those activities, because you don't always have to pursue English learning. But what you should do, since you're living in the US, pursue things that you like. The English learning occurs without you even knowing it, right? I think that's the best kind of way to that's the best way to improve your English, is when you're not even trying. It just happens through your daily activities.
Yeah, finding that common like activities and the topic that you guys are going to be talking about, that topic that you enjoy. So it makes that flow much easier. You feel more comfortable because of the topic. You're going to be engaged in it instead of just being a listener throughout the conversation. No, you're going to be engaged in it because it's something that you enjoy. So, and it's going to come naturally with you because of, the topic, right? Because it's
Yes.
something that you all enjoy. So yeah, definitely.
And I think that watching a lot of TV, YouTube, TV shows, movies, that will help. Of course, you don't have to be in the US to consume content like this. But you definitely consume as much of this type of content as possible, because um, it's just it's reinforcement. It'll help you learn proper pronunciation. It'll help you learn the culture as well. Watching the news is not a bad thing. You know, it's very interesting. I've had people say to me they understand they understand like news articles rather, and they understand what reporters say. And I mean, I didn't say this to them, but they felt very proud that they were able to understand everything, and that's good. That's good, but you do have to know that the news is written for, let's say, sixth grade level in American school. So it's not particularly high. It's not a very high level of English. But you
Mhm.
just know that. And but then at the same time, the beauty of consuming that type of content is that it's sort of for everybody, right? So if you find yourself able to understand that, you can pretty much, believe it or not, even though a sixth grade English level sounds kind of low, believe it or not, if you can understand all of that, that's pretty much going to work. That's pretty much going to serve you well, and you'll be fine. Your English will be fine for most contexts in day-to-day life. So whilst having an English level at just the sixth grade level sounds low, but in actuality, it's good enough. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, and
you don't need to
mhm.
be able to understand a PhD thesis in order to feel like your English is good, even though you can only understand what news articles write, which is at a sixth grade level.
Mhm.
That's good enough.
Yeah. And I always say is read a book, like pick out something that you like, whatever that genre is. I mean, novel books are great. I mean, that's going to help you improve in many ways. I mean, sentence structure, grammar, the listening part, if you're reading out loud, right? And your speaking part,
Yeah.
your pronunciation too. I mean, you can look up if you're not sure about the pronunciation. And the beauty of it is that it's going to help you in your business writing, right? Because
Yes.
the more you read, your writing is going to even excel to that. So that's a good thing I always say about reading part. Yeah, for me, it's like I taught people with zero English, and I don't speak their mother tongue. So, but I'm able to teach them. So whatever that language is, whether you're Russian, whether you're Arabic, or whether you're Brazilian, I can teach you English, and I don't even speak your language. I mean, that's how confident I am in my teaching ability. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have any more tips for people?
Mm. Feedback. I say get a lot of feedbacks from, native speakers. I mean, or it doesn't have to be native speakers, someone in a higher level. Say, for example, if you're an A2 level and you talk to somebody with a B2 level or a C1 level, add feedback of what do you think about your English? What do you think I should do? What do you think I should improve on? Should I, is my pronunciation, if it's so, then should I, listen more and mimic more, do shadowing, get feedback. I think it's one of the best thing, and the best feedback really is you. If you record yourself, you are the number one critic. You can critique yourself if there's something wrong with the way you're sounding or your pronunciation or that sentence structure. Um, this is something that you should look at the feedback. And also, something about the tip too is speak more and doesn't matter if you make mistake. There's no grammar police out there going to issue you a ticket, a grammar ticket. So just go out there and talk. If people will understand you, maybe your grammar is incorrect, but people is going to understand you. And as you continue to do that, you're going to be able to correct your own, as you get better. So it becomes more natural for you.
Yes, absolutely. Seek feedback. And just give yourself a break, because here's the thing, right? You don't ever need to be as good as a native, because you're not and you never will be. And I don't mean to
Hmm.
sound harsh when I say that, but when I say you're never going to be a native speaker, that's just a fact. You cannot. It is not your
You're
native
not born there.
language. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was not your first language. It's impossible. No matter how good your English is, you're not a native.
Hmm.
So that out of the way, you can still be good, but here's the thing. Even if you make mistakes, people are very forgiving. Okay, people are very forgiving of people who speak their language as a non-native. Now, if if Leon and I made mistakes, people might be like, what? Because we're natives. But if you make the same mistake, nobody cares. Nobody's going to judge you for that, because it's like there's a different standard for somebody who's a non-native versus somebody who's a native. And that's not to say
Hmm.
that natives don't make mistakes. It's just that the type of mistakes that natives make are different than the type of mistakes that non-natives make. It's almost like there's two columns on this table. The
Hmm.
mistakes that natives make don't generally end up on the column that the mistakes excuse me on the mistakes that non-natives make. They don't often cross over. They're distinct.
Hmm.
um and that's okay. So don't worry about not being as good as a native. It's not important, it's not necessary, and people don't expect you to be. And more important, however, is the idea that you're trying to express. I watch a lot of international news videos on YouTube, and you have commentators or whatever. They're speaking English. They're speaking it sometimes with a very easily decipherable accent. And what's interesting, I've noticed, is that sometimes, like, their English will actually be very good, but they have a strong accent. And yet I don't have a problem with that. And I'm actually amazed, like, wow, their English is so good. And a lot of times they say things in a very American kind of way, even though they say it with a German accent or whatever accent. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And I am just as interested in listening to that person, even if they make a few grammatical errors, than anybody else, because of the message, like the content, the substance of what they're saying is so good, so well thought out, so deep. And ultimately, that is more important. People are not going to persecute you for, quote, bad English. They're going to persecute you for your opinion that they don't like before they'll persecute you for your language skills.
Hmm. Yeah, and you talked about news reporters. I mean, they're speaking because they have voice training, right? And they're also like public speaking. This is what they focus on because that's their job.
Yes,
Then they
yes.
code switch, right? When they code switch, when they're out of the newsroom or something, then you see their true self, and they're totally different in how they speak when they're in front of the camera and off the camera. So it's like
Mhm.
code switching. So don't relate that everything that you see on news anchor that they speak really well. No, because that's their profession. They had a lot of voice training on that and public speaking. So, you got to consider that because once that camera is off, you really see how they truly talk. I saw one reporter
True.
that had some kind of incidents like that. He was reporting. He was somewhere in a small town. He was African American. He was like, like typical newscaster. Very clear in his speaking and elegant and all that. But then he accidentally swallowed a fly or a bug and he started coughing and he was pissed and he started all of a sudden code switched and he started saying
Oh,
informal things, inappropriate things. He was
yeah.
completely like a total switch. Yeah.
Oh,
So keep
okay.
that in mind. Yeah.
He went from perfectly speaking neutral accent to
Yeah.
ghetto. And you
Yeah.
know
Either way you could say that. Yes. Uh-huh.
that's funny because they say that in moments of surprise and distress, whatever comes out of your mouth is how you really speak. It's not
Yes.
your ability to, like you say, code switch, read a teleprompter, be coached
Hmm.
in the way you speak or practiced. If you're very practiced, of course, we can all perform like an actor. But
Hmm.
the way you speak in that moment, you suddenly trip over something, and you're like, whatever. However, you just said the word, oh crap, that is how you really speak. And a lot of
Yeah.
people try to mute that aspect of themselves. They try to
Hmm.
hide it so that they don't sound like somebody from a different world, a different social class. Yes, but the truth comes out when in moments of surprise and distress.
Hmm. Now remember, like actors and actresses, they're acting. They got, parts that they memorized. But
Yes.
once they stumble, then they say cut and then start over and then do it
Yeah.
again, right? In
Yeah.
our real world, we don't have that. We can't go and say, okay, cut and then start again, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is the difference, right? It's a
Yep.
reality, it's a real world. Yeah.
That's right. Well,
Mhm.
uh, so I think this gives you guys a good idea of what you need to do. We armed you with probably, oh, I don't know, about 10 tips. So good luck with those. Give it a try. Let
Mhm.
us know how it goes. Leave a
Mhm.
comment. Give this video a thumbs up, guys. And also, we look forward to bringing you more content like this in our next video. Leon, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I had a blast. See you,
Yep.
everyone.
Thank you. See you guys in the next
See y'all later.
podcast. Bye bye.
Ciao. Ciao, everyone.